Money was offered to him, but the price meant a life. And an Apache woman, the sun had just begun to rise over the jagged cliffs of the Arizona territory, painting the desert in shades of orange and gold. Samuel stood outside his small cabin, rubbing the sleep from his eyes and breathed in the crisp morning air. Life had never been easy for him. He was a frontiersman, a hunter, and a trapper, living on the edge of a land that was as beautiful as it was unforgiving. His younger brother, Thomas, still slept inside, dreaming unaware of the challenges that awaited them each day. Samuel often felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him like the heavy sky above. Thomas depended on him, and Samuel's thoughts constantly wandered to how he could provide enough food, clothing, and a safe future for the two of them. Days were long and hard. Samuel's life revolved around hunting and trapping, walking for miles across the dry land to track deer, rabbits, and small game. He knew every stone and every cactus, every hidden stream that promised water, and every shadow where danger could be waiting. Despite his skill, the desert did not yield its treasures easily. Some weeks brought enough food to eat well, but others left Samuel and Thomas relying on the small stores of dried meat and flour they had carefully saved. It was a life of struggle, but Samuel was proud of the independence it gave him. He had always believed that living honestly, working hard, and respecting the land was the only way to survive. One morning, as he prepared his traps along a narrow canyon path, a cloud of dust appeared on the horizon. At first, Samuel thought it was a wandering band of travelers or perhaps a group of settlers moving through the territory. As the figure came closer, he noticed the man was dressed far differently than anyone Samuel had seen in the area. He wore a long coat that seemed too heavy for the desert sun, polished boots that reflected the sunlight, and carried himself with an air of wealth and authority. Samuel instinctively stepped back, gripping the handle of his knife, cautious but curious. The man approached slowly, tipping his wide-brimmed hat. "Good morning," he said, his voice smooth and confident. "Are you Samuel the trapper?" "Yes," Samuel replied cautiously. "Who wants to know?" "My name is Mr. Caldwell," the man said, producing a small notebook from his coat. "I come with a proposition that could change your life." Samuel raised an eyebrow. He had heard such promises before, mostly empty words from traveling merchants or land speculators. But there was something in the way this man spoke, the way he carried himself, that made Samuel pause. "I'm listening," he said, keeping his tone neutral. Caldwell smiled slightly, glancing at the horizon as if measuring how far Samuel's eyes could reach. "I know this land is not easy, Mr. Samuel. A man like you works hard, day after day, risking his life for small rewards. I can offer you something greater, something that could ensure your brother and you want for nothing, but it comes with a condition." Samuel's heart began to beat faster. He had always dreamed of having enough money to provide a stable life, to buy supplies for winter without worrying if they would survive the cold. But something in Caldwell's tone made him wary. There was a hesitation in the words, a pause that suggested the offer was more complicated than it first seemed. Caldwell continued, "There is a woman, an Apache woman, who holds knowledge of something valuable. The details are not fully known, but I need her brought to me. If you succeed, the reward is beyond anything you have ever seen. Enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life, and more." Samuel's mind went blank for a moment. He had heard stories about the Apache people from traders and settlers. They were proud, brave, and fiercely protective of their own. This woman, whoever she was not just a target. She was a person with a life, a family, and a place in the world. The thought of harming or capturing her made Samuel's stomach turn. "Why me?" he asked cautiously. "Why not send someone else?" "Because you know this land," Caldwell said, his eyes sharp. "You understand the mountains, the canyons, the trails that few outsiders can navigate. You can find her where others would fail. That is why I am here." Samuel swallowed hard. The weight of the offer pressed down on him. On one side was wealth he could use to provide for Thomas, to build a proper home, to buy tools, food, and supplies without ever fearing hunger again. On the other side was his conscience. He had always lived by a simple rule: do no harm unnecessarily. Yet now, the choice seemed to demand exactly the opposite. To take the money would mean betraying that rule and perhaps destroying a life. Caldwell handed Samuel a small leather pouch. It was heavy, filled with coins that gleamed in the morning sun. "Take this," he said. "Consider it an advance. Decide quickly. Opportunities like this do not wait." Samuel felt the weight of the coins in his hand, as if they carried a physical burden alongside their promise. He could see Thomas's eyes lighting up at such a sight, imagine the comfort it would bring. He could almost taste the relief of not having to worry about the next meal or the next winter. But every coin seemed to whisper a warning. At what cost? For hours, Samuel walked the desert, the pouch of coins in his pocket. He wandered along dry creek beds, over rocky ridges, and through sparse forests of mesquite and cactus. With every step, his mind replayed the possibilities. He thought about Thomas, imagining his young brother laughing, carefree and safe. He thought about the woman, imagining her life, her home, and her freedom. The desert seemed unusually silent, as if it too was waiting for his decision. By midday, Samuel returned to his cabin, exhausted from walking but unable to rest. He sat by the small fire he had built for breakfast, staring at the pouch of coins. He thought of the stories his father had told him about the Apache people, about their bravery, their skill, and their deep connection to the land. His father had always said, "Money is useful, Sam, but honor and respect are worth more." Samuel knew that wisdom now more clearly than ever. That evening, Thomas emerged from the cabin, rubbing his eyes. "Samuel, what's wrong? You've been gone for hours," he asked. Samuel looked at his brother, feeling the warmth of love and protection that bound them together. "It's nothing yet," he said quietly, "just thinking." Thomas, sensing the tension, sat beside him. "Are you worried about food again?" Samuel shook his head. "No, not food. Something else, something bigger." He did not mention the pouch of coins or the dangerous choice before him. Words seemed inadequate. Instead, he watched the desert stretch out in every direction, realizing that soon the choice would come. And when it did, there would be no turning back. That night, Samuel could not sleep. He stared at the ceiling of the cabin, thinking of mountains, trails, and the mysterious Apache woman. He thought about life and death, about what it meant to be a man in a land that demanded hard choices, and about the kind of person he wanted to be. The coins still lay on the table, catching the faint glow of the moonlight, their shine both tempting and taunting him. By dawn, Samuel made a decision, not yet about what he would do, but about what he needed to understand. He had to see the truth for himself, to know the land, the people, and the woman before any choice could be made. The money could wait. The life of another could not. With a steadying breath, he prepared his gear, knowing that the journey ahead would test him in ways he could not yet imagine. As Samuel stepped out into the morning light, the desert seemed to watch him, its vastness reminding him of both the danger and the wonder of the world. He tightened the straps on his pack, checked his rifle, and began walking toward the unknown, each step carrying him closer to a choice that could change everything, for him, for Thomas, and for the woman whose life was now, in a way, in his hands. The offer had been made, the coins had been placed before him, but the true test was only beginning. Samuel knew that the path ahead would demand courage, wisdom, and a heart strong enough to choose what was right, even when the cost was great. And as he disappeared into the shadows of the canyon, the desert held its breath, waiting for the story to unfold. Samuel left the cabin before sunrise, the crisp desert air filling his lungs as he adjusted the straps on his worn leather pack. He carried only what he needed: a rifle, a few days' worth of food, and his water canteen. His mind was still heavy with thoughts of the strange offer, the shining coins, and the mysterious Apache woman he was supposed to find. Yet even as he walked, a part of him resisted the idea of harming or capturing anyone. He felt as though the desert itself was testing him, guiding him toward the choice he would soon have to make. The first day of his journey was filled with careful observation. Samuel moved quietly, leaving no trace of his passage. He followed the narrow trails he had learned as a boy, paths that twisted through rocky ridges, dry creek beds, and scattered groves of mesquite. The sun climbed higher, scorching the land, but Samuel pressed on, knowing that any delay could mean losing track of the woman or the land she called home. Along the way, he began to notice the signs of the Apache people. A broken branch, cleverly repositioned to mark a path, or a small pile of stones that could serve as a signal to someone traveling ahead. Samuel paused often, studying these markers, feeling a growing respect for the intelligence and skill required to survive in such a harsh environment. He realized that the woman he sought was no ordinary target. She belonged to a culture deeply connected to the land, trained to live in harmony with it, and to defend herself with knowledge and courage. The desert was beautiful in its own harsh way. Samuel noticed the sharp contrast between the dry, cracked earth and the brilliant blue sky overhead. Shadows stretched long across the rocks, creating shapes that seemed to dance as the sun moved. Birds of prey circled high above, scanning the land for movement. Samuel could hear the soft rustle of lizards in the sand and the distant howl of a coyote. Every sound, every sight, reminded him of the vastness of the world he was entering, a world where survival required skill, patience, and respect for every living thing. By the second day, Samuel encountered his first real challenge. A narrow canyon blocked his path, its steep walls rising sharply on either side. The only way forward was to climb, using handholds and ledges that seemed almost too small for safety. Samuel carefully tested each step, his muscles straining as he pulled himself upward. Halfway up, he paused, looking down at the path he had left behind. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, a mosaic of stone and sand. For a moment, fear gripped him, not for himself but for the responsibility he carried. Every choice he made now could affect lives beyond his own. After hours of climbing, he reached the top and paused to rest. He found a small stream of water trickling through the rocks, a rare gift in the arid land. Kneeling, he drank deeply, feeling the cool water revive his body. He knew that the desert did not forgive carelessness, and he had to remain alert at all times. Each day was a lesson in patience, observation, and endurance. That evening, as Samuel set up a small camp in a sheltered alcove, he thought about the Apache woman again. He imagined her moving through the land with the same skill he had witnessed in the markers she left behind. She was not just a person, she was a symbol of resilience, a living connection to a culture that had survived against great odds. The more Samuel considered her life, the more he realized that he could not approach this task lightly. The money, tempting as it was, now felt like a weight pressing against his conscience. Night in the desert was quiet but never truly peaceful. Samuel lay under the stars, listening to the sounds of the wilderness. Coyotes howled in the distance, and the wind whispered through the rocks, carrying with it the scent of sage and distant pine. He thought about Thomas, wondering if his brother could ever understand the choice that lay ahead. Could anyone understand the burden of deciding between wealth and the life of another? The coins Caldwell had offered seemed to shimmer in his mind, each one a reminder that some things, no matter how valuable, could never replace the worth of a human life. On the third day, Samuel began to notice signs of life beyond the desert, trails of deer, small animals rustling in the underbrush, and even the faint footprint of someone else who had passed through recently. He followed these clues cautiously, aware that the Apache woman would be alert and skilled at avoiding strangers. Samuel's respect for her grew with each passing hour. He realized that capturing her would not be simple, and that it might require more than strength or cunning. It would require understanding, empathy, and perhaps a willingness to challenge his own beliefs. During a brief rest by a shallow pool, Samuel reflected on the stories his father had told him about the Apache people. Tales of bravery, loyalty, and survival filled his mind. His father had always emphasized respect for life, and for those who walked the land with knowledge and skill. Samuel now felt those lessons more deeply than ever. This was not just a journey for wealth. It was a journey that tested his character and his understanding of what it meant to live honorably. By the fourth day, Samuel found himself in a canyon that matched the descriptions Caldwell had given him. It was narrow, with walls of reddish stone rising high above, and the shadows hiding the secrets of those who moved within. He paused, listening. There was no sound of humans yet, only the natural chorus of the desert, wind, birds, and the occasional movement of small animals. Samuel's heart pounded with anticipation. He knew that he was close, that the woman was somewhere within these rocks, and that each step he took could bring him closer to a choice that would define him. He moved carefully, leaving no footprints in the sand where possible, and observing the land as though it were a living being. Every tree, rock, and shadow could hold a clue. Samuel found small signs: a stick propped against a stone, a trace of fire ash, a footprint partially covered by sand. Each mark confirmed that someone skilled was nearby. He felt a mix of excitement and dread, knowing that he was approaching a person who was not only resourceful but also fully aware of the dangers around her. That evening, Samuel set up camp once more, this time closer to the canyon where he believed the woman lived. He lit a small fire, careful to keep it low and contained, and cooked a simple meal of dried meat and bread. He watched the firelight dance across the rocks, imagining the life that existed beyond the glow, courageous, independent, and entirely free. Sleep came fitfully, filled with dreams of shadowed canyons and the mysterious woman whose life he now felt responsible for. On the fifth day, Samuel made a critical decision. He realized that he could not approach this as a simple task of capture. The woman was no object, no prize. She was a person with knowledge, skills, and a right to live freely. His mind wrestled with the memory of the coins Caldwell had offered, but now they seemed hollow, insignificant in comparison to the weight of conscience. Samuel understood that this journey was not about money. It was about courage, honor, and the difficult choice of protecting life even when tempted by wealth. As the sun rose on that fifth morning, Samuel paused at the edge of the canyon, looking down into the shadows below. He knew that soon he would encounter the Apache woman, and the reality of the choice before him would be impossible to ignore. He felt fear, yes, but also a growing sense of resolve. He was determined to act with care, respect, and wisdom, even if it meant forsaking the riches Caldwell had promised. Every step into the canyon was deliberate. Samuel moved slowly, listening for the faintest sounds, watching for movement, and considering every possibility. The desert had taught him patience. The journey had taught him respect. And now, as he descended into the heart of the canyon, he understood that the greatest test was not in tracking or capturing, but in recognizing the humanity and courage of the person whose life hung in the balance. By midday, he had glimpsed signs of recent life: scattered stones, the remains of a small fire, and a faint trail leading deeper into the canyon. Samuel's heart pounded with both anticipation and dread. He was close. The woman was near. And the choice he would soon face would define not only his future but the integrity of his soul. He paused to rest, breathing in the dry, warm air and thinking of Thomas. Samuel realized that the lessons he carried, the lessons of honor, courage, and empathy, were not just for himself. They were for the young brother who looked up to him, for the people he would encounter, and for the desert itself, which demanded respect from those who walked its harsh but beautiful expanse. By late afternoon, Samuel could feel the presence of someone else. Not just a person, but a spirit in tune with the land. He had learned much from the journey. The desert was not merely a place of survival, but a place of moral testing. And as he prepared to meet the woman for the first time, Samuel understood that this was only the beginning of a challenge that would test his heart, his mind, and the very essence of who he was. Samuel had been tracking the faint signs of life through the canyon for several days. Every step he took was careful and deliberate. The Apache woman he sought was no ordinary person, and he understood now that she could see or hear him long before he could see her. The desert had taught him patience, the journey had taught him respect, and every moment of observation had sharpened his senses. By midday, Samuel reached a narrow part of the canyon where the walls pressed close, forming shadows that seemed almost solid in the bright sunlight. He paused behind a large rock, peering into the space below. There, by a small fire that had long since burned down to embers, he saw her, Ahulai, the Apache woman. She was sitting quietly on a rock, her hair tied back with a simple cloth, her eyes scanning the area as if she could read every inch of the land. Her movements were precise, careful, and completely natural. Samuel felt a mixture of awe and hesitation. She was not a target. She was a human being, fully alive, fully aware, and fully in command of her surroundings. For a long moment, Samuel simply watched. He saw how she tended to a small garden she had cultivated near the rocks, how she moved with confidence and grace, and how alert she remained to the slightest movement or sound. He realized that any attempt to capture her would not only be difficult but likely impossible without her consent. She was clever, resourceful, and deeply connected to the land in a way he had never encountered. Samuel lowered himself behind the rock, considering his options. He could follow the path Caldwell had described, attempt to trap her, and claim the reward. The coins he had seen in Caldwell's pouch flashed in his mind like burning fire, tempting him with wealth and security for himself and Thomas. But at the same time, he felt a tug in his heart that made him hesitate. The woman before him was not just a problem to solve. She was a person with her own story, her own knowledge, and her own right to freedom. As he considered his choices, Samuel thought about his father's words from long ago. "Respect life, Sam. True strength is in protecting it, not taking it." Those words, which had seemed simple when he was a boy, now carried a weight that pressed on him like the canyon walls themselves. The coins, the promise of comfort, and the path Caldwell had set before him all seemed suddenly hollow in comparison to the life before him. Despite the temptation, Samuel knew he could not act without understanding more. He decided to observe Ahulai for a while, learning her habits and patterns. Over the next few hours, he saw her gather water from a small spring, repair a few pieces of her shelter, and cook a modest meal over the embers of her fire. She moved with purpose and efficiency, her skills evident in every action. Samuel began to respect not just her courage, but also her intelligence. She was someone who had survived in a harsh world through knowledge, patience, and resilience. That evening, as the sun dipped below the canyon walls, casting long shadows across the rocks, Samuel found a hidden vantage point where he could remain unseen but still watch her. He noticed that she paused occasionally to look at the horizon, her eyes reflecting thoughtfulness and a quiet determination. Samuel imagined what it must be like to live in the wilderness, fully aware of danger, yet at peace in one's own home. He realized that the life he had been offered in coins could never compare to the depth and richness of a life lived in balance with the land. As night fell, Samuel kept his distance but stayed alert. The desert sounds changed with the darkness, the soft scurrying of nocturnal animals, the distant howl of a coyote, and the wind whispering through the rocks. He thought of Thomas again, imagining how he would react if he knew the full weight of the choice Samuel faced. Could he explain to his brother why the coins meant nothing if it meant harming another person? Could he explain why sometimes the right path required walking away from wealth and comfort? The next morning, Samuel decided to make a cautious approach. He wanted to test whether Ahuli would notice him, whether she would respond with hostility, or whether there was a possibility of communication. He moved slowly, stepping lightly over stones and loose sand, keeping low to the ground. Every sound seemed amplified in the quiet canyon, every movement deliberate. As he drew closer, he saw her glance in his direction, her sharp eyes catching a movement in the distance. For a moment, Samuel froze, unsure whether to continue or retreat. But then, instead of fleeing or raising an alarm, Ahuli remained calm. She studied the rocks, the trail, and the air around her, clearly assessing a potential threat. Samuel realized that he had underestimated her awareness. This woman was not merely surviving. She was commanding the land with a quiet authority that was both impressive and intimidating. He spoke softly, almost a whisper. "I mean no harm." Ahuli's eyes narrowed, but she did not run. Instead, she tilted her head, as if weighing his words against the evidence of his presence. Samuel felt a surge of hope. Perhaps, if he approached with honesty and respect, he could find a way to communicate without violence. He continued, careful to show no sign of aggression. "I am Samuel. I am only traveling and I wish to understand." For several long minutes, she remained silent, her gaze fixed on him. Then slowly, she stood and stepped closer, keeping her movements deliberate and cautious. "Why do you come here?" she asked, her voice calm but firm, carrying the weight of authority. Samuel lowered his rifle, keeping his hands visible. "I was sent to find you," he admitted. "But I do not wish to harm you. I only want to understand. I've seen how you live, how you survive. I respect that." Ahuli studied him for a long time, her eyes searching for any hint of deceit. Finally, she spoke again. "Many come with promises, with threats, with greed. You are not like them. Why?" Samuel hesitated, unsure how to explain. "I do not want to live by taking what is not mine. I do not wish to betray what is right. The man who sent me, he promised gold. But I have realized that some things are worth more than gold." Ahuli's expression softened slightly, though caution remained in her eyes. "Words are easy," she said. "Actions are what matter. You are in my land. You must show respect, not just speak it." Samuel nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. He spent the day observing and assisting in small ways, helping to move a log, carrying water from the spring, keeping watch over the small camp without intrusion. Ahuli remained wary but allowed him to stay, testing his intentions, testing his respect. Each action, each moment, became a lesson in trust, patience, and honor. Over the next several days, Samuel learned more about Ahuli's life. She spoke of her people, of the struggles they faced, of the knowledge passed down from generation to generation. She was proud, strong, and wise, a living embodiment of resilience and courage. Samuel listened, captivated not only by her words but by her strength of character. He realized that the task he had been sent to complete was no longer a matter of capture, but of understanding, empathy, and moral courage. Samuel also began to see the desert differently. No longer was it merely a place of survival. It was a teacher, guiding him toward a deeper understanding of life and morality. He saw the delicate balance of nature, the interdependence of creatures, and the importance of respecting the land and the people who lived in harmony with it. One afternoon, as they worked together to repair a small shelter, Samuel felt a shift. Ahuli glanced at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of wariness and tentative trust. "You are different," she said quietly. "You could have taken the easy path. Many would, but you did not." Samuel nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and humility. "I realized the easy path would cost more than I am willing to pay," he said. "Some things, some lives cannot be bought." Ahuli studied him for a moment longer, then nodded. "Perhaps you will survive in this land after all," she said. "Not just because of skill, but because of the heart you carry." That evening, as Samuel prepared a small fire and watched the stars emerge over the canyon walls, he reflected on the journey so far. He had come seeking money, promised wealth, and the promise of a better life for Thomas. Instead, he had found something far more valuable, a lesson in humanity, honor, and respect. The Apache woman was no longer a stranger or a target. She was a teacher, a guide, and a reminder that courage and empathy could be far stronger than any coin or reward. As night deepened and the desert fell silent, Samuel knew that the coming days would test him further. He would face difficult choices, danger, and perhaps even betrayal from those who sought to profit from the lives of others. Yet, he felt ready. He had learned patience, gained understanding, and discovered a moral strength he had never known before. And in the quiet of the canyon, with the fire crackling and the stars shining overhead, Samuel realized that the journey was no longer about money. It was about honor, courage, and the unspoken bond forming between him and the Apache woman, a bond that might determine not only the course of their lives, but the choices that would define what it truly meant to live with integrity. Days passed quietly in the canyon, but Samuel knew the peace could not last forever. The desert, while beautiful and vast, always carried a sense of urgency, of time moving and dangers approaching. Caldwell, the wealthy man who had promised Samuel wealth in exchange for capturing Ahuli, would not remain patient indefinitely. Samuel felt it pressing on him like a shadow, the knowledge that someone else expected results, that coins and promises could tempt men to do anything, even harm. Samuel had grown to admire Ahuli deeply. Her wisdom, her courage, and her careful balance with the land made him realize that she was more than just a person to be found. She was a living symbol of resilience. The more he spent time with her, the more he understood that he could not betray her, no matter the temptation. Each evening, as they gathered water, repaired her small shelter, or cooked meals together, Samuel felt a bond forming, one of respect, trust, and quiet companionship. But the tension was unavoidable. One morning, as Samuel climbed a ridge to scout the surrounding area, he saw smoke rising in the distance. At first, he thought it might be from a distant campfire, part of Ahuli's work, but as he drew closer, he realized the truth. Caldwell's men were moving into the canyon. They were heavily armed, moving quickly and clearly determined to find her. Samuel's heart pounded. He knew that their arrival could mean violence, capture, or worse. He hurried back to Ahuli, who was already aware of the approaching threat. Her eyes were sharp, scanning the horizon, every muscle in her body taut with readiness. "They are coming," she said, her voice calm but firm. "You must decide. Will you stand with me, or will you follow the path that brought them here?" Samuel's hands clenched into fists. The decision that had been weighing on him since Caldwell's offer now became urgent and real. If he betrayed Ahuli, he could secure the coins, ensure a comfortable life for Thomas, and fulfill the promise made to him. If he protected her, he risked angering men who were powerful, dangerous, and determined. But Samuel knew, deep in his heart, that he could not hand her over. She was a person, a human being, and her life was far more valuable than any wealth. "Then we stand together," Samuel said finally. "I will not let them take you." Ahuli nodded, a mixture of relief and pride in her eyes. She moved swiftly to prepare their position, gathering stones and covering the narrow paths with obstacles that could slow down anyone unfamiliar with the land. Samuel helped, using his knowledge of the canyon to create hidden barriers, traps that were meant not to harm but to confuse and delay. Every rock he shifted, every branch he positioned, felt like a declaration of loyalty, an act of courage born from respect. By mid-afternoon, Caldwell's men appeared at the entrance to the canyon. Their shouts echoed off the walls, sharp and demanding. "Where is she?" one called. "Bring her to us." Samuel stayed hidden, watching as they moved forward, unaware of the clever obstacles set in their path. He could feel the fear that might have gripped him months ago, replaced now by a focused determination. Every instinct, every skill he had honed over years of hunting and surviving in the desert was put to use. He observed, calculated, and waited for the right moment. Ahuli, standing on a ledge slightly above Samuel, watched silently. There was no panic in her movements, only calm awareness. Samuel realized that he had underestimated her strength. She was not just a person to be protected. She was a partner in survival, capable of defending herself in ways Samuel could not yet anticipate. Together, they formed a team, each covering the other, blending knowledge of the land with careful strategy. As the men advanced further into the canyon, Samuel took a deep breath. He knew he had to act decisively to protect Ahuli. Using the shadows and the narrow twists of the canyon, he created diversions, rocks rolling down paths, sudden noises from behind boulders, and clever misdirection that made the men believe the canyon was more treacherous than it was. Step by step, he guided them away from Ahuli, leading them into dead ends and loops that bought precious time. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by the occasional shout or thud of falling stones. Samuel's body ached, his muscles screamed, but he did not falter. Every move was deliberate, every breath calculated. He could feel the danger pressing closer, the knowledge that one mistake could cost Ahuli her freedom, or worse, their lives. But he refused to let fear control him. His loyalty was no longer a question. It was a choice he had made and would defend with every ounce of skill and courage he possessed. By late afternoon, the men were exhausted and disoriented. They had been led through false trails, confused by obstacles, and slowed by the clever layout of the canyon. Samuel could see their frustration, their anger, and their growing uncertainty. It was then that he realized the true lesson of the journey. Courage was not only about facing danger, but also about using wisdom and respect to protect life. Ahuli turned to him, a faint smile appearing on her face. "You are not like the others," she said softly. "You have chosen honor over greed, life over wealth." Samuel nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and humility. "I could not have done otherwise," he admitted. "Some things are worth more than any coin." The sun began to dip behind the canyon walls, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch forever. Samuel and Ahuli moved quickly and quietly, taking advantage of the fading light to slip further into the maze-like canyon. They knew Caldwell's men would not give up easily, but the delay had given them a critical advantage. With careful planning, patience, and respect for the land, they were able to stay one step ahead. As night fell, they found a small, hidden alcove where they could rest safely. Samuel tended to the small fire, ensuring it was low and contained, while Ahuli prepared a simple meal from the supplies she had gathered. The two sat together in silence for a moment, letting the tension of the day ebb away. Samuel realized that the experience had changed him profoundly. He had faced temptation, danger, and moral conflict, and he had chosen a path that required strength, courage, and integrity. Over the next few days, Samuel and Ahuli worked to strengthen their position. They used their combined knowledge of the land to create hidden shelters, pathways, and signals that would keep them safe. Samuel observed Ahuli's wisdom and skill, learning from her movements, her awareness, and her ability to anticipate threats. He began to understand that true courage was not about confrontation alone, but about careful planning, respect, and the willingness to protect others even at personal risk. One evening, as they watched the sun set over the canyon, Samuel spoke quietly. "I was promised wealth if I brought you to them," he said, "but I have learned something far more valuable than coins. I have learned that protecting life, showing respect, and acting with honor, that is true wealth." Ahuli nodded, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "You have grown stronger in these days," she said, "not just in skill but in heart. You have chosen the path of respect even when it was difficult. That is rare in this world. Samuel felt a deep sense of pride, not in himself, but in the bond that had formed between them. It was a bond built on trust, respect, and shared courage, a connection that could not be measured in money or material wealth. Together, they had faced danger, outwitted those who sought to harm them, and preserved the freedom and dignity of a life that Caldwell had tried to turn into a prize. But Samuel knew that the struggle was not over. Caldwell's men would continue to search, and the temptation of wealth could return in many forms. He understood that protecting Ahuli required constant vigilance, patience, and the willingness to make difficult choices every day. The lesson of the journey was clear. True courage was not just about survival, but about living with integrity and honor, even when no one was watching, even when the reward seemed distant or uncertain. As the canyon grew dark and the stars emerged overhead, Samuel felt a quiet sense of determination. He had faced temptation, danger, and moral conflict, and he had chosen to act with courage and honor. The coming days would test him further, but he was ready. He would protect Ahuli, defend life, and honor the lessons of the desert, lessons of patience, wisdom, and respect for those who walked the land with knowledge and courage. And so, in the heart of the canyon, with the fire flickering and the desert night alive with distant sounds, Samuel and Ahuli prepared for what lay ahead. The journey had brought them together, taught them resilience, and revealed the power of honor and compassion. Whatever challenges awaited them, they knew that they could face them together, guided by courage, respect, and the understanding that some things, like life and dignity, were worth more than any reward. The days that followed were tense and uncertain. Samuel and Ahuli remained in the canyon, moving quietly from one hidden alcove to another, always alert for signs of Caldwell's men. Each night, the stars stretched endlessly overhead, and the desert whispered with the soft rustle of wind and the occasional distant howl of a coyote. Samuel had grown used to the rhythm of survival, the delicate balance of patience and vigilance. But even as he worked to keep Ahuli safe, he could not shake the thought that their reprieve might be temporary. Despite the tension, the bond between them grew stronger. Ahuli had begun to trust Samuel fully, observing his actions as much as his words. She saw that his loyalty was not a fleeting gesture but a conscious, repeated choice, a choice to protect life even when temptation and danger loomed. Samuel, in turn, learned more about her world. She told stories of her people, of the lands they had once roamed freely, of the traditions and knowledge that had been passed down for generations. Samuel listened, often in silence, letting her words sink in. He realized that these stories were more valuable than any coin or treasure Caldwell could offer. One morning, Samuel climbed a ridge to survey the surrounding desert, keeping a careful watch for any approaching danger. From this vantage point, he could see the distant movement of riders, small shapes against the horizon. Caldwell's men were still searching, but they were disorganized, frustrated by the clever paths and traps Samuel had set. The realization brought a mix of relief and concern. The immediate threat was delayed, but it had not vanished. They had to remain vigilant, for the canyon would not protect them forever. When Samuel returned to the camp, Ahuli greeted him with a faint smile, a small signal of confidence in their strategy. "You have done well," she said softly. "They will not find us here, not easily, but they will try again. We must be ready." Samuel nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility more heavily than ever. He understood that this was not just a battle for survival. It was a test of morality, courage, and wisdom. Protecting Ahuli meant more than hiding or running. It meant thinking ahead, anticipating danger, and acting decisively when necessary. And through it all, he had to remain true to his principles, no matter how tempting Caldwell's gold might appear in his mind. As the days passed, they developed a routine. Samuel helped Achuli collect water, forage for food, and reinforce their hiding places. He observed the land, learning every twist of the canyon, every shadow that could conceal them or signal danger. Achuli, in turn, shared her knowledge freely: how to read the desert, how to find hidden streams, and how to anticipate the movement of men who relied solely on force rather than skill or understanding. Samuel marveled at her wisdom, realizing that it was not only her strength that kept her safe, but her intelligence and deep respect for the land. One evening, as the sun set and the canyon walls glowed golden, Achuli turned to Samuel. "Why did you not take the gold?" she asked, her voice calm but curious. Samuel looked down, feeling a mixture of humility and resolve. "Because some things are worth more," he said quietly. "Your life, your freedom, the trust you place in me. I cannot betray that for coins." Achuli studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Few would make the same choice," she said. "Many would see the coins and forget the cost." Samuel thought of Thomas, of the young boy waiting at home, and of the lessons his father had taught him about honor and respect. He realized that these lessons were now more important than ever. Life, dignity, and courage were treasures that could not be bought, and in choosing to protect Achuli, he had discovered a wealth far greater than anything Caldwell could offer. As they rested that night, a sense of calm settled over them, though only briefly. In the distance, Samuel could hear the faint sound of movement, the rustle of horses, the quiet snapping of branches. Caldwell's men were relentless, but Samuel had prepared. Using the terrain, the shadows, and their knowledge of the canyon, he and Achuli created diversions and false trails to mislead the searchers. Each step was deliberate, each action designed to protect life rather than inflict harm. During these tense days, Samuel reflected on how much he had changed since the beginning of the journey. He had come to the desert seeking money, driven by a desire to provide for his brother and escape hardship. Instead, he had found something far more profound: a lesson in morality, courage, and empathy. The coins had lost their allure, replaced by the knowledge that some choices are worth more than any reward. Achuli, too, noticed the change in Samuel. She had seen many people in her life: travelers, traders, and men who sought advantage at the expense of others. But Samuel was different. He acted with respect, foresight, and compassion, qualities that were rare in a world often dominated by greed. In their time together, she had come to trust him fully, relying on his skill and judgment as they navigated the dangers of the canyon. One afternoon, Samuel spotted a group of Caldwell's men attempting to flank the canyon from a different path. He quickly signaled to Achuli, and together they moved silently to intercept them with clever obstacles and diversions. Rocks rolled down narrow slopes, and branches shifted in ways that created confusion, slowing the men's progress without causing them harm. Samuel marveled at the power of strategy, patience, and respect for life, realizing that courage was not only about confrontation, but also about protecting others in the smartest and safest way possible. By evening, the men were frustrated and exhausted, their shouts echoing uselessly against the canyon walls. Samuel and Achuli watched silently from their hidden perch, a quiet satisfaction settling over them. The immediate danger had passed, but they knew they could not be complacent. Caldwell would try again, and the desert could change in ways they did not yet anticipate. Over the following days, Samuel and Achuli continued to strengthen their position, moving to higher ground and scouting the surrounding area. Samuel felt a growing sense of responsibility, not only to protect her life, but to ensure that the lessons he had learned about courage, honor, and integrity were carried forward. He realized that true wealth was not found in coins or material comfort, but in the choices one makes and the lives one preserves. One evening, as the sky deepened into twilight, Samuel and Achuli shared a quiet moment by the fire. Samuel reflected on the journey, the trials they had faced, and the moral clarity he had gained. "I came seeking gold," he said softly. "I thought it would make everything better, but I have learned that life, respect, and honor, they are far more valuable than any treasure." Ahuli nodded, her eyes reflecting the glow of the fire. "And you have proven that even in the face of danger, you can choose wisely. Few have the courage to do so. Many would have given in to fear or greed." Samuel felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not in himself, but in the knowledge that he had acted rightly. He had chosen to protect life, to respect another person's freedom, and to act with integrity even when faced with temptation and danger. He knew that these lessons would stay with him forever, shaping the kind of man he would become and the example he would set for Thomas. In the days that followed, Samuel and Ahuli managed to evade Caldwell's men completely. Their combined knowledge, patience, and strategic thinking ensured their safety. Samuel realized that the bond they had formed was unbreakable, built on mutual respect, trust, and shared courage. They had faced moral challenges, life-threatening dangers, and the lure of wealth, and they had emerged stronger and wiser. As Samuel prepared to return home, he felt a mixture of relief and pride. He would leave the desert without the gold Caldwell had promised, but he carried something far more valuable: the knowledge that he had acted rightly, preserved a life, and earned the trust of someone remarkable. He knew that Thomas would never understand the full measure of the choice he had made, but that was not the point. The right action was its own reward. Before departing, Samuel turned to Ahuli. "I will leave now," he said, "but I will not forget what I have learned, nor the trust you have placed in me." Ahuli nodded. "Go with respect," she said. "Carry what you have learned, and you will never be lost, even in a world that forgets the value of honor." With that, Samuel began the journey home, each step filled with reflection and understanding. He had faced temptation, danger, and moral conflict, and he had chosen courage, empathy, and respect. The desert, once a place of hardship, had become a teacher, guiding him toward a deeper understanding of life and integrity. When he finally returned to the cabin where Thomas waited, Samuel felt a sense of peace he had never known. He did not bring gold or coins, but he brought something far richer: lessons of honor, bravery, and moral strength that would shape his life forever. He shared simple stories of survival, respect, and courage, teaching Thomas the values that had guided him through the desert and the canyon. And in the quiet moments that followed, Samuel knew the truth. Some things, life, honor, dignity, and trust, are priceless. Wealth can tempt, but it cannot replace the value of courage, integrity, and the choice to do what is right. The desert had tested him, the journey had challenged him, and the Apache woman had shown him the strength of the human spirit. In the end, Samuel understood that true riches are found not in coins, but in the actions we take to protect what is most precious: life, freedom, and the bonds of respect that connect us all.